If you open up any atlas and take a look at a map of the world, almost every single one of them slices the Pacific Ocean in half. To the human eye, most maps center all land masses on Earth, creating the illusion that water can handle the butchering and be pushed to the edges of the world, as if the Pacific Ocean isn't the largest body living today, beating the loudest heart, the reason why land has a pulse in the first place. The audacity one must have to create a visual so violent as to assume that nobody comes from water, so nobody will care what you do with it. And yet, people came from land, are still coming from land, and look what was done to them. When people ask me where I'm from, they don't believe me when I say water. So instead, I tell them that home is a machete, and I belong to places that don't belong to themselves anymore. Broken and butchered places that have made me a hyphen of a woman, a Samoan American that carries the weight of both colonizer and colonized, both blade and blood. California, stolen. Samoa, sliced in half, stolen. California, nestled on the western coast of the most powerful country on the planet, Samoa, an island so microscopic on a map, it's no wonder people doubt its existence. California, a state of emergency, a way of having the drought rid it of all its water. Samoa, a state of emergency, a way of becoming a saltwater cemetery if the sea levels don't stop rising. So when people ask me where I'm from, what they want is to hear me speak of land. What they want is to know where I go once I leave here. The privilege of assuming that home is just a destination and not the panic, not the constant migration that the panic gives birth to. What is it like to know that home is something that is waiting for you to return to it? What does it mean to belong to something that isn't sinking? What does it mean to belong to the very thing that is causing the flood? So many of us come from water, but when you come from water, no one believes you. Colonization keeps laughing. Global warming is grinning all at your grief, how you mourn the loss of a home that isn't even gone yet, that no one believes you're from. How everyone is beginning to hear more about your islands, but only in the context of vacations and honeymoons, football and military life, exotic women, exotic beaches, exotic fruit, but never asks about the rest of its body, the water, the islands in them, the reasons why they're sinking. No one visualizes the Pacific Islands as actually being there. You explain and clarify and fix their incorrect pronunciation and explain till they realize just how vast your ocean is, how microscopic your islands look in them, how easy it is to miss when looking on a map of the world. Excuses people make for why they didn't see it before.
I'm a professor and the chair of American Ethnic Studies at the University of Washington in Seattle. I'm also the faculty director of the Diversity Minor Program and the minor program on Oceania and Pacific Islander Studies, among other things.
And so, what do you mean when you say the ocean in the
The
school?
ocean of the school, well, it means having your culture, in this case, Pacific Islander cultures that center around the ocean as a kind of sacred space and also as a repository of all things that are valued in Pacific Islander cultures. It's engaging with that and keeping it alive in the place where you go to school. A lot of these students felt like when they were entering school, um, individualism was much more valued than collective work. If you're a student entering college and you're looking for courses to take, and you, well, this is not a big surprise to many Pacific Islander students, and you don't see any course that's offered about your people's history, your people's culture, your people's language, any aspect of your culture, how would you think, right? I mean, and then you see all of these other courses that are offered that are all about other, other cultures, their history, their literature, their languages. They're all offered there, and you are in a public university, and so that was a big deal for students. It's like the feeling of being not only devalued, but also inferior, not worth studying. You're building from scratch. You're trying to educate the university at the same time as you're trying to build scholarship, you build community, you build a more expansive, sort of form of organizing. 20 years later, we have a minor, right? And so that's a little concession. It's been a struggle. And part of that struggle is not only about the ways in which structural racism still operates in terms of hierarchizing and valuing different cultures against each other, but also the ways in which money talks, right? In order to build a program, you need lots of funding and lots of resources, which our communities don't have, and building alliances. Yeah, part of the struggle here is what we call a circular argument or a circular condition, in which there's no program because there are no professors to be recruited, or there are no students to study them. There are no students because there are no teachers. How can you attract students to study Pacific Islander studies if there are no teachers who are experts in the field, right? How do you train experts in the field if there are no mentors, who have gone there before you? And even if there are, where are they? How could it's so it's a struggle to sort of locate them too, because they're in particular pockets of the nation.
I'm still alive because I'm not afraid of what I already know wants to kill me. Because I'm a first generation, queer, Samoan woman, 4 chapters of a survivor story excavated from my bones, the reason your oppression doesn't know what to shoot first. I'm still alive because they C-sectioned me out of my mother's middle in spite of knowing my gender. They think that blood is the only thing a woman loses the moment she gives birth to a girl. My gender never belonged to itself. When it's raped, America does this funny thing where it tells me I was asking for it at the same time that it tells me to stay silent. The hemline of my skirt is an overactive jury that treats my body like a courtroom, that treats my voice box like a closet, that they say I deserve to die in on the floorboards of my sins because I fell in love with a woman, made an altar of her body since no one else ever has. I'm still alive because everyone deserves to be treated like a holy offering. A sacred thing it is, y'all, to find and know God in the last place homophobia would ever think to look. A back door into heaven after being put through hell for having the faith of a faggot. A dyke for a daughter. The names your community calls you in a language that isn't the one that they immigrated here with. I'm still alive because most days, y'all, I let the trauma write all of my poems, because saying them out loud on the stage is the first step towards getting help. Because I trust a microphone on a mic stand in a room full of strangers before I'll ever trust the police. This stage is both sanctuary and emergency room. My people are both griots and doctors, and patients with no patience left in them, just stories with skin, too dark for sympathy, because no one ever considers our pain an American tragedy. I'm still alive because I watch Oakland every day pick itself up from its own concrete, scrub the blood out its cracks before the new neighbors arrive, on blocks that their mortgage used to own. A white hipster's wet dream next to a BART station that Oscar's daughter, Nia's father, will never have the stomach to take. I'm still alive because no one seems to see that there is no difference between Iraq and East Oakland, Southside Chicago and South Central, a battalion of young soldiers and the students in my poetry workshop, how no one has mornings like them. How they wake up in their own piss and grief to go to another friend's funeral more times than they even go to class. How the biggest fear for most of my friends is to raise a black child in a justice system of a joke that will continue to say taser when we kept saying gun, that will continue to cry acquittal when we kept crying murder, that will continue to sing God bless America when we kept saying God please have mercy on all of us. I'm still alive because in the past decade we've lost Nelson Mandela, Amiri Baraka, Maya Angelou, Gabriel Garcia Marquez, Yuri Kochiyama, Grace Lee Boggs, Afeni Shakur, Prince, Aretha Franklin, Ntozake Shange, Whitney Houston, Nipsey Hussle, Terisa Siagatonu, Toni Morrison. And upon learning of all of their passings, I hung my poetry at half-mast. We, artists of the revolution, know that we are on borrowed time, using borrowed words, watching our leaders turn ancestor in our life. I'm still alive because whatever wants me dead doesn't know that you can't kill somebody who isn't afraid anymore. somebody who was ready to leave this place an ancestor, somebody who was ready to give birth to the generation that would bring about the liberation I was always destined to make, but never meant to see.
I'm Dr. Vika Palaita. I'm an associate professor in critical Pacific Islands and Oceania studies. I feel that I and many of my students founded years ago, over a decade ago. I'm here in Lacey, Washington. I moved up here because of the pandemic. Once we closed in March at the City College, I immediately moved to come and be around with my family. Part of the reason why I live here and I live there and also go once a month to California to also see my brother's kids. So I also partake in their upbringing and raising them as well. Went to University of Washington in 1997. I should have flunked out my first quarter there. I think my GPA was like 0.09. Horrible. I mean, and I wasn't partying. I was homesick. I wanted to go home. I felt like I didn't belong in Seattle. And what's interesting is that there were very little Pacific Islander things going on at the University of Washington. So it took about 2 years for me to get my feet wet. I was supposed to leave the university, leave education entirely, when my brother, Matthew, had gone to prison. When my brother went off to prison, I already knew, I've learned already by that time that, wow, the system is really set up against us. Islanders just don't do well in education. Islanders, majority of us in Hawaii are going off into the prison industrial complex. Because when my brother went off to jail my second year, went to prison my second year, I was already being asked that I should probably leave school and go to work because we needed money to try and bail him. I was already looking for a job. I was already ready to hang up the coat, hang up the shoes and the book bag and to give it up. And then I met my mentor today, two of them. Dr. Myron Apolado, Filipino from Chicago. He was the vice president of minority affairs at the time, and Dr. Rick Bonus, right? No Islanders, right? And they really supported me. In fact, they actually helped me to find the money to be able to help get my brother to bail him. But eventually he lost his case and my brother went off to prison. And so the last 4 years of my time there was really about traveling to Oklahoma, to Watauga, Oklahoma, and sort of helping so I was sort of facilitating all these things between, talking to prison officials and talking to my parents. I kind of became the translator. And then 2003, I flew off and moved to the Bay Area.
So I'm Vika Palaita. I'm one of very few Samoan students graduating with Ph.D. I always drive with him. Everywhere I travel, I always take him with me. Every time I think about Crit Pack Studies, what it means, I think of my brother. I think of him. I think of his life. I think about what he's gone through, the things that he could do and things that his family could not help him with. And even more why you need a place, you need an academic field like Crit Pack Studies, because that diasporic living, that living in the diaspora, it's a different beast. It's a different beast than living at home. Yeah, I'm not saying it's more intense I'm just telling you it's a different type of beast that you're dealing with living here in the States. And crit pack studies, it covers that. It allows the intellectual space to engage about the very same things that my brother went through. This is where I normally come, when I want solace, just want to get out, see nature for a little bit, and I can't get to a national park or a hike. This is where I come. A lot of ideas get processed here. While I was looking for other ways to find my way, what it means to live in the States or the diaspora, that journey was very difficult, right? You had to lean on people. I'll never know what it feels like to be a navigator, but you sort of feel like, oh my gosh, you have no choice but to voyage. You're out here. The ocean out here is rough. So ocean becomes that, not only the metaphor. Sometimes I hate calling it a metaphor because it presumes that it's not real. In Western academic spaces, we might say, oh my gosh, that's beautiful, cultural theory. In crit pack studies, we say that's not cultural theory, it's cultural reality. These are real things that we're talking about. So the ocean not only becomes a lens, it becomes our cultural reality. That is what we live. But to me personally, crit pack studies is my brother Matthew. My brother was involved in a killing. He got into a fight. This person that he fought, Samoan as well. This person also passed away, right? He died from his injuries. And so my brother ended up serving time for that. So my brother spent almost 10 years. You know, he was staying up there. He was homeless because he wasn't getting along with his wife, but he wanted to be around his kids. And that's what he did, even if he needed to go homeless, and he did it. And when you're homeless, you're going to get into a lot of other things too, right? It's just, I'm not saying all homeless folks do, but you're sort of the chances and opportunities for you to get into other things, right? It offers itself up, right? That lifestyle. So my brother got in, and he was trying to get on his feet, get a job. And then in 2017, on October 23rd, he was on his way to an interview. The police stopped that vehicle. His friend was driving. My brother was in the back seat. And he was shot and killed. He was simple traffic stop. He was getting out of the car. The police say that he was armed, and the police says that he was armed and he was trying to shoot them, and it actually was his phone, and they shot him and brought him down. The students at these institutions, we connect. We link up with each other, right? That's actually the fundamental vision of the building of Pacific Studies. It's not to just only localize in an academic institution, it's also to make connections across state lines, across counties, across schools. Something that we've been trying to do in the Bay Area. Now we live in a different kind of organization, political structure that prevents us from doing the very same culture that brought our families here, right? And that's literally a culture of Inafamaulik, a culture of Samoa, Anga Whakatonga, Ho'o Hawaii, right? And if you look deeply into those cultural systems, those cultures are about love. Those cultures are about compassion. Those cultures are about connection. Don't buy into the racial labels, right? But buy into the power of who we are as people.
In college, I used to sit in the back of the class with the other students of color and listen as my white peers theorized the hell out of the oppression that we were born from. Buzzwords like institutionalized racism and class warfare was sugar on their tongues. Sweet, comfortable, words from a language my community didn't even know existed because we were too busy living the realities of them. You see, it's one thing to major in ethnic studies. It is a whole nother thing to be the reason for its existence. You see, for the white students in my major, ethnic studies was like a free study abroad program that didn't require that they bring their baggage with them, a privilege that is easy for them to close in their textbook at the end of class. You see, my life is beginning to feel a lot like a free ethnic studies lecture with no tenure. Is this what they meant by public education? But study my racial profile till it exhausts you. Study how Black has been made to feel like the green light for stop and frisk. How brown has been made to feel like a much needed check stop at any given border. Ask me what it's like to have my skin be made to feel like a nuclear missile we all know is coming, and you still won't know what it's like to sit in the back of a class and be studied because of how tragic your history is, as if we've only been brought in to be dissected, as if frogs, rats, and people of color can only be understood when you cut them open. You see, when ethnics study ethnic studies, it's not school anymore. It's a lesson in survival. And I'm tired of playing teacher with my oppression. If I'm not doing it on a stage, I'm doing it from the margins of a classroom. I'm doing it from the margins in my notebook, always on the margins of something, never the core, never asked to be anything more than what makes it easy to feel sorry for. See, it's easy to avoid confronting the things that make us feel uncomfortable, the things that make us feel guilty. Who chooses to walk through the war zone if you are told that you don't have to, if you grew up believing that there isn't one, if what you don't know won't kill you? Race is the rent I pay for this skin. So the belief that racism doesn't exist anymore, especially in my own major, is when I feel the foreclosure of this home taking my knees from right under me. You can't claim that racism doesn't exist if you've never known what it means to survive it. If you keep looking at the war zone like a teaching moment you're not ready to learn the lesson from, a comfort zone you're not willing to sacrifice. You see, it's easy to avoid confronting the things that make us feel uncomfortable, the things that make us feel guilty. But comfort is what kills us in the long run. Comfort is sitting down when you should be on your feet. Comfort is staying quiet when you should be speaking up. Comfort is speaking too much when you should be listening. Comfort is building borders for safety, but not bridges for healing. Comfort is celebrating diversity, but never discussing it, as if a Black president was enough, as if a Heritage Month is enough, as if ethnic studies is enough, as if this poem is enough. Comfort is sitting in the front of the class, forgetting that we're all sitting right behind you, wanting to remind you that this war zone still exists, wanting to tell you that this isn't comfortable for any of us.
My family's from Palau. I was born there, but then I moved here for school since kindergarten to college, yeah, basically. And my family is actually from Palau. They came here as well, but they were around their teens as well. And they came here. My mom, she got her AA degree, but my dad didn't get to finish due to family stuff. Our status is kind of hard to explain because I have a lot of problems when it comes to like our citizenship status, especially when enrolling to school and financial aid wise. So we are under the Compact Free Association Act, and basically what that means is that we're able to come here not on a visa, but on an I-94, allowing us to work, go to school, and just live our lives without having to worry about having to go home and stuff. However, with the I-94, it does get difficult, especially when it comes to like legal papers, like government papers and stuff, because a lot of people aren't aware of our status. Being a Pacific Islander at Chabot College it's great. It's just the legal wise, it's like it's kind of frustrating and tiring because you have to explain yourself all the time when it comes to like legal papers or financial aid or just enrollment. However, the campus is really inviting. Like I feel welcomed when I come onto campus. Asians Unite is basically a program or a club that ensures that all our ocean, Melanesian, Micronesian, and Polynesians all succeed in a higher education. And basically, for the classes that we started, it was basically the ethnic Pacific ethnic studies class that is taught by Andrew Vai. Nijin tonight was actually the on the hiring committee. Someone else wasn't telling our story. In the Bay Area, there's a lot of PIs. So, and like I feel more connected since there's more PIs. If I go to other places, there's no PIs and they don't know what they like Pacific Islanders are. Like I've been to my cousin's school, and I was like, "Do you guys have any Pacific Islanders?" And then his friends was like, "What is a Pacific Islander?" So it's like kind of like shocking.
When we shoot the shit about our childhoods, my cousins would always claim that our grandparents loved me more than they loved them, that I was their favorite grandchild. In the name of fairness, I would always tell them that it's not true, that grandpa and grandma loved us all equally. One of my cousins, relentless in her efforts to convince me otherwise, would always tell me, Terisa, you don't understand because you're not advocacy. In the Samoan language, we use the term advocacy to mean half Samoan and half anything else, our way of calling somebody biracial. Broken down, advocacy is a hybrid term, afa meaning half and kasi meaning one, literally translating into half of one. Every one of my cousins on my mother's side of the family is half of something. Half Samoan, half Mexican, half Samoan, half black, more half Samoan and more half black, because that's the advocacy that most of my cousins are made up of. And then there's me. I am not advocacy, and my cousins never let me forget it. We use the term uli uli to mean black. Black as an adjective, as in the black jacket, black hair, black cat. Uli uli. We use the term mea uli to mean black person. Mea uli is also a hybrid term. Mea means thing, and uli still means black. What we are saying is that black people aren't even people when translated in my language. They're just mea uli. What we are saying is that my cousins were always right, that being advocacy comes with a price, but that being mea uli doesn't even come with a pulse, black thing. Being advocacy meant watching my family water down our culture so that my cousins didn't have to bear the responsibility of learning it, so that my cousins could grow up putting in only 50% of the effort in becoming it. Being mea uli meant that my grandpa really did slam the door in my aunt's face when my uncle brought home a black woman, when my other uncle brought home another black woman, when my other uncle brought home another black woman. Being advocacy means knowing that just because you can't understand when people speak Samoan around you, you know that they're talking about you because of how many times they've said mea uli while standing in the room with you. Being mea uli meant that my cousin had every right to be paranoid of how much love she lost out on for having the darkest skin in our family. You see, the difference between being black and brown can be as subtle or as stark as your family wants it to be. That sometimes your first experiences with racism is watching your cousins grow up wondering why your grandparents could only love half of them at a time. Sometimes your family is your first ethnic studies lecture before you ever step foot into a classroom. How they taught me that just because I'm brown, just because I'm a person of color, doesn't mean that I can't be anti-black. No matter if my cousins are black, no matter if my partner is black, my solidarity isn't golden just because I'm not white. There is a hierarchy to this, that it's not always people of color versus white people. Most times, in most of our cultures, it is black people, people with darker skin versus the rest of us. It is advocacy versus full-blooded. It is your family versus your family. It's you versus the mirror. A lesson in not pretending like the village didn't leave some children behind to spend the rest of their lives wondering if the village even wants them. Sometimes the village doesn't want every child, and sometimes you gotta stop pretending like it does. There is no translation for anti-blackness in my language. There isn't a translation for anti-blackness in a lot of our languages, but it doesn't mean that we haven't been nurturing it when we speak, when we live, when we immigrate, when we dream American, when we have children and only love the parts of them that our language has translations for, that whiteness has approved. I'm learning that just because it is cultural, it doesn't mean that it's sacred. That oftentimes the village has to apologize. Our traditions and customs and language has to change. And every time you gotta believe the child. When they show you where it hurts, when they leave you searching for the right words to name their pain, when the name for their pain can't be translated in your language but in your silence, when your silence is the very reason for why you have no other choice but to speak.
My name's Kehaulani Folau. I'm the third daughter of Olono and Melsina Ramon Folau, and we're at the University of Utah. I'm studying education, culture, and society, and I'm in my second year of my Ph.D. My dad's from Tonga, and he migrated here, or not even here, but he migrated to Hawaii in the 80s to attend Brigham Young University, Hawaii. And then similarly, my mom is from Panape. Her dad died when she was 13 though. And so she moved around. She lived in Saipan for a while with her brother, one of her brothers, and then moved to Virginia to live with another brother, and then found herself also at Hawaii, studying at BYU. But then they met at the Polynesian Culture Center, didn't finish. And then a lot of my dad's siblings were here in Utah. And so they moved down here. They had my two older sisters in Hawaii. And then I was the first one born here in Salt Lake City. I honestly never thought of going to Utah. There's a rivalry between BYU and Utah. But then I grew really critical of the church, and so I was just like, no, let's come here. But then also my two older sisters came here. So yeah, I also did my master's, even though, yeah, so many of my mentors were like, don't do your graduate work here. And I'm like, okay. But then when it came time, I was just like, I don't know, that you just felt right. And my family's here too. Like my parents are still here, my aunties are here. My grandparents were here, but they moved back to Tonga 2 years ago. Utah actually has the fastest growing PI population in the US, including California and Hawaii. And so there's a sizable population on your west side, in the west side of Salt Lake, as well as throughout Utah, but it's concentrated on the west side of Salt Lake. And so for those who are here from Utah, they'll be like, oh, she's from the west side. Like, it's typically pictured as like the ghetto or like low income neighborhoods. And I'm just like, okay, yeah, but that's my community. That's where I'm from. As an undergrad, because I was sponsored by the Diversity Scholars Program, I had to take an Intro to Ethnic Studies class, like we all did. But at that time, it was only a minor. And so when I came in here, I was an architect major, and I was one for 3 years until things happened. And then I ended up being a business major. And then my fourth year of my undergrad, ethnic studies became a major. And a lot of my faculty members were a part of that process to make it a major. And they were like, hey, be the first graduate of ethnic studies here. I became the first ethnic studies graduate. But it's grown so much since I've been an undergrad, and I'm kind of jealous. But when I was an undergrad, there was only one Pacific Islander course. Now, ethnic studies has become its own department. And it's awesome. They now have a Pacific Island Studies certificate for undergrads. My supervisor right now, who is Belinda Otukolo Satipan, she was the first Tongan PhD student I've ever met. And it was when I was an undergrad. And I was just like, oh shoot, what's a PhD? Like, I didn't know at the time. And she was just like, oh, like, it's to become a doctor. And I was just like, oh, what? And she's like, yeah, not all doctors like work in the medical field. Like, you could work in other places. And so I was just like, that's so awesome. And I kind of, since I've been an undergrad, I've kind of followed her career of just she's my example of what I could be and of the work that I could be doing. And before I met her, like, I didn't even know, I didn't know there was anything called a PhD, but I didn't know that we could do it, just because I've never seen it. And I think it's important to have examples, not only to look up to, but to also follow. It's so hard being a first-gen student because, I mean, just thinking about it, you have to navigate it, you have to navigate your journey without really knowing where you're going. And so for there to be others in the community who have done it and experienced it, it's like, I don't need to do this alone. I can follow the path that they've etched. And if I want to deviate from that plan at all, they're there to help me. And so I think that's why representation is so important, at least to me, because it gives options and it gives pathways to things that didn't seem possible at a time.
So I was having lunch with my dad the other day, and he started taking the conversation into a direction that I dread the most. The part where he asks me for the 100th time, when am I going to get my Ph.D.? His voice is a stern and steady tremble. His broken English always gets nervous every time it's in conversation with mine. He makes getting a Ph.D. sound so simple. To my family, education has always been the simplest prayer, and I've become the holiest place they can turn to for refuge. In all my years of being a student, I've learned that education is like healing the wounded. Some of us get an education so that we could get a good job, and some of us get one just so we can heal. A lot of us get one so that our parents can breathe. School has always been an emergency room of sorts, an incubator keeping my family's American dream alive. It's the reason I had no other choice but to go to school and graduate, the way my father never did. And not just school, college, the way my mother never will. And not just college, grad school, Ph.D., the whole 9 yards. This is the part of the dream where my parents don't care to wake up. The part where my future is their retirement plan. That this is what they left Samoa for. The reason my father enlisted in the U.S. Army for 20 years. The reason he retired disabled and used his military benefits to pay for my tuition in full. This is the sacrifice my mother made to drop out of community college to take care of her 7 brothers. The reason my graduation robes felt so heavy on me each time I walked across the stage to get both my high school diploma and both my college degrees. The weight of my ancestry reminding me that Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander is one of the fastest growing populations in this country, with some of the lowest graduation rates and highest high school dropout rates. It's the reason only 18% of us hold a bachelor's degree. The reason only 25% of our kids passed all college readiness benchmarks in English, reading, math, and science. It's the reason why out of 885 Army recruitment stations, American Samoa is ranked #1 in the world for enlisting the most people. So to me, graduation didn't signify that I made it. It just meant that I was the one who survived, the 18%, the one who tested well enough for California to never leave behind, the one who slipped through the cracks out of the projects and into all AP classes. So I guess you could say that I was lucky enough to be on the right track, an accelerated learner, the one too polite to be misdiagnosed with ADHD, the one who was always told to look ahead at my future but never down at my feet. Look at the cracks. Notice the hands of the kids in my community grabbing at my ankles, the ones that the village was too busy to raise, the ones that the teachers are too busy to teach, the ones who are always sent to the detention center but never the college and career center, the ones who were never taught about the Pacific Islands in the classroom but who everyone knows on the football field, the one that the coach scouts like a wolf pack, promising them an athletic scholarship but never a college degree. The one that military recruiters dream about before bed each night, the ones who are never taught the difference between potential and prison, future and failure, classroom and casket, the ones who were never taught that education is like healing the wounded. Some of us need an education just so we can heal. Because if I've learned anything about being a student, it's that school never taught me how to think critically. It just taught me what to think critically about. To the kids in my community, my ainga, fa mole mole, please. Just know that you can love the village that raised you while also holding us accountable for your success. You deserve to succeed as the brilliant scholar that you are. You're not stupid. You're not a failing statistic. You are more than an athletic scholarship, more than a soldier with a gun. Teach them how graduation doesn't get to happen without you, what it truly means to never leave a child behind. The classroom needs both your voice and your mind, the way our islands need your legacy. You are the greatest family heirloom we have. The reason why our people read the stars first, the reason the rest of the world calls us the pioneers of navigation. We have always known what we're destined for. As long as you're leading the way, you are the water that our islands depend upon for their survival. The reason why education is like healing the wounded, and no one deserves to heal more than you do.